Okay. Oh, Laura Beth, thank you. So for everybody else who's just coming now, we'll wait about 5 minutes and then we'll get started just like usual. But if you can, just this question, like can emotional intelligence be taught? Why not think about it for fun? Mm-hmm. 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 Let's see. Mm-hmm. Daniela, can you talk a little bit more about why that is? What would multiple staff and administrators, what would that do? How would that function to support emotional intelligence? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cindy, if you can too, can you talk about what explicit natural teaching means? We'll wait just a couple more minutes. This is a favorite topic of mine. Mm-hmm. Ah, Daniela, I see what you mean. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, you did? Cindy, should I mute myself? Let me see. Here, I'll mute myself. Now you try. No. No, I can't hear you. Are you on the phone too? The phone is good. Mm-hmm. Daniela, I get that. Those kind of school-wide. Mm-hmm. All right, let's wait about one or two more minutes, sorry. Cindy, I don't know. I'm sorry to hear that for the mic. Well, if you want to write more, you can write more. If you don't, it's okay. I was just curious what you meant. Teresa, I haven't thought about that book in a, in a long time. Um, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're writing something, feel free to go ahead and finish writing that. That's totally fine. If you are finished writing, um, let's talk. So, thank you, Cindy. Thank you. That's what I was thinking you meant. I just didn't know what you meant by natural. And Vanessa, natural in the moment. Thank you. Perfect. So like when it comes up for you as a teacher, it's occurring in the interaction, then you pull out what's explicit. I'm guessing that's what you mean, Cindy. Vanessa, we use second step to help with social development. Doesn't address everyone's needs. We also throw some lessons out in order to address things that are coming up in our classroom. Yeah. And on the playground, I had a student with too many friends who wanted to play with him, so we built lessons around that, which ultimately benefited everyone. Yeah. Vanessa, that's really interesting that you say, that you kind of mentioned that, because I think someone else's, Daniela, when Daniela was talking about like everyone kind of being on the same page, teachers and administrators, for an approach to working on social skills and social cognition, I actually was thinking of like Second Step or those kinds of programs. And there's always there's a balance, right? So there's the teaching social skills explicitly that can be really valuable. And there are programs like that, like Second Step, that kind of go through what these social skills are that students need that they can kind of get a shared language around and a common understanding of, and that can really support like a whole school kind of conflict resolution approach to things, because then the kids themselves can use the vocabulary of the program if they're on the yard or they're in the hallway and they have some kind of a social breakdown. Then they can start to take a little bit of ownership over what it means to repair those social breakdowns using the skills that they've learned in these programs. However, to what Cindy's saying, and actually to what Vanessa's saying also, that's fine, but something that, like the idea of a social skills autopsy addressed, is those incidents that occur where there's a breakdown and it's not addressed by the program. So Vanessa has this description of things coming up on the playground as like a source of topics. For instead of doing the Second Step lesson in sequence, you do a lesson on a particular social exchange, a social problem, a social challenge that is emergent from actual experience. And I think for what Cindy's saying about teachers kind of making social interactions and the demands on social interactions and the ways to appropriately socially interact, making that explicit in a natural way, like as it comes up in the classroom, serves a slightly different purpose, right? So there's like kind of general social skills broadly writ large, and then there's like responsive teaching around social skills. And I don't think there's one or the other that's necessarily the right way, but I think there's value in thinking about them as distinct approaches, because that way you can potentially address a broader range of needs that come up for students in the classroom. Great. Let me just, feel like people were writing a bunch, so I'm curious what you were saying. I want to look too. Oh, great. Okay. Similar to what social, exactly. Second Step program since you recommended it. Great. I have loved it. Laura Beth, what did you love about it? Just curious. How did it help? You're welcome to pop on the phone or write.
My students have responded well to the topics in the primary level. It's just class pictures for them to see examples of, and it's been great. I noticed, just to example, like the listening lessons we've been finishing up.
Yeah.
The students really didn't understand all aspects of listening, even though like you have every poster that shows the different ways to do it. Just the explicit lessons, it's a little like, are you listening to me game, has really helped them understand better what it means to listen to us when they're talking.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up. Thank you, because that's that kind of touches on this other aspect of social cognition and social skills development in the classroom that's like less visible than a kind of breakdown that a social skills autopsy would be warranted for, right? So like the social skills autopsies are things that are going to come out where there's a conflict, there's a problem, there's something that's very obvious that has gone wrong socially. Things like listening to when someone's speaking is often like a more subtle, invisible skill that without it, there's a constraint on interpreting social information, on learning in general, on interacting with peers, on contributing to discussions. There's social impacts of not tuning in and listening to what someone's saying. But it's not something that would necessarily cause a teacher to notice, stop, and do an explicit lesson. So it might be a way to think about these kind of broader social skills programs like Second Step, versus something like a social skills autopsy, or what Cindy was talking about, just kind of like natural highlighting need for social skills support in the classroom. There might be just a way to think about them as complementary ways of addressing social cognition and social skills development in the classroom. One kind of offers a vocabulary and a framework for thinking about social interactions in these programs, and then the other one can be used to support students in learning to address breakdown. So that's kind of interesting, I think. Taylor, are you at Chime? I feel like, Taylor, you are at Chime. Am I right? Let's see. Class Dojo is also creating videos with their... Really? Okay, hold on. Have a school counselor. Okay. So the zones of regulation, Taylor, do you mean that in terms of like the OT kind of way, like how you're regulating your energy level and attention? Uh-huh. Okay. So that's interesting. We use this yellow language anytime. Oh, great. So that idea, okay. So now I see, I'm reading Taylor's post. I believe it can. We have the school counselor come into our classroom to teach the zones of regulation. They also teach tools on how to respond. This thing jumps around, it drives me crazy. On how to respond when in each of the zones and it's going through the different emotions. We use this language anytime our students are in yellow, blue, or red zones, and refer back to how to handle your emotion when sad, frustrated, and angry. So that is a great example, thank you, of a way to use a shared vocabulary around topics that are really abstract and emotionally charged. And especially for younger children, I don't know especially, but it may be differently for younger children than for older children. When there is a challenge in the area of social cognition or in a social interaction, because of the uniquely social and emotional components of those, it can be really difficult to talk about it, right? So like if a kid's upset or frustrated or angry or was in a social breakdown, sometimes that's like not the best time to kind of go in and think about social skills development. Using some of that language of the zones of regulation might be a way to bring a student back to an emotional place and a place where they're available to start thinking about what happened in the breakdown. So that idea of like the social skills autopsy that Rick Lavoie was talking about, those autopsy conversations are happening not during the interaction that has broken down, but that's happening as like a separate conference. And I think part of what that accomplishes is it provides a distance from the incident itself so that the student can kind of take a look at it without being potentially blocked by the emotion that's in that space. And I think that sometimes those shared vocabularies among students, teachers, administrators, and or a school can be really helpful for taking an incident that could feel like it's just an emotional, personal thing and recontextualize it in the frame of a social incident that everyone can interpret and offer support for. So that's one of those ways that I think that thinking about addressing social cognition explicitly just in general and in response to what's going on can be really useful. Oh, zone of regulation. Okay. Does zone of regulation still use that dial? When I used it, it was that like kind of had like a, why am I blanking on that term? Almost like a speedometer. Maybe I'm just being old because I used it a while back. Anyway, I saw someone talking about. Oh, Laura Beth, I like that. Go Noodle has lots of videos on calming down and centering your feeling. Yeah, I think some of that mindfulness stuff in schools I'm seeing is an attempt to that as well. Right? Have you guys heard about some of that? There's a lot of schools, and I live on the south side of Orange County and San Diego County, I believe, in the north side, so in like Carlsbad, I think in particular, and maybe Encinitas, they are doing mindfulness work with kids in school. And what that looks like is often strategies for deep breathing, strategies for focusing and remaining calm. Those kinds of activities, I think, are also ones that can help kids in the moments of breakdowns. They won't necessarily get you to the place of recognizing what the social breakdown was and rectifying it. But I think that mindfulness can operate similar to zones of regulation in that it can get a child into a place where they're available to think about the social breakdown in a productive way, as opposed to getting blocked by the sense of emotion around it, which is valid, but often not that helpful for analyzing a social situation with a little bit of distance. Mm-hmm. Your counselor does mindfulness. Oh, perfect. Chime's very zen these days. Great. That's okay. Do they, Shira? Do they or Taylor? Because I know you're there too. Oh wow. Okay, Eva. I'm gonna read your story out loud to everyone in a second. I want to just ask this question about whether or not mindfulness and zones of regulation are connected. So, like I think you said, Shira, the counselor comes in and does mindfulness, and the OT does zones of regulation. Is there in what are those complementary in any way? Do they feel like competing ways of thinking about calming down, or starts the sessions with mindfulness? Ah, got it. Okay. Breathing, recognizing a person's state. That's great. Oh, perfect. They come in at the same time. Love. Okay, so it's like a co-teaching about how they work together. Great. Yay. Okay. So that is good to hear. I'm not surprised that that's the way the model is at Chime, because it's a co-teaching model for people who are not at Chime and aren't as familiar with the school. That's partly what I was getting at with that, is that those two approaches accomplish much the same thing and I think really do support each other. They're different, obviously, but they have enough in common that I think they lend themselves well to thinking for teachers and kids to kind of bundle them in terms of thinking about ways I can get my body into a state where I'm available then to learn. Fantastic. Thank you. All right, now I want to go back and read what Eva wrote because it looks good. So yeah, I'm going to read it out loud. You guys can probably read it, but otherwise I think it's weird if I'm just sitting here silent. So I'll just read it so we can all hear. So Eva says, my mother-in-law is a kindergarten teacher. And this year she had a boy named Bob who approached his peers in a socially inappropriate way. He wanted to make a friend, but he was aggressive and hit his mates, therefore became a persona non grata. Got it. When my mother-in-law recognized that, she invited the class in a circle. They sat down and started a discussion that the summary was, could that be that Bob just trying to make a friend but does not know how to do it? Each student nodded and agreed. After this discussion, everybody wanted to become Bob's friend, and the little boy changed tremendously. What caused this? Bob's father was a busy businessman, and the father had no time for his son, which made Bob frustrated, and unfortunately he could not communicate his feelings. So, thank you for sharing that, Eva. There's, I think in this case it may be that for that boy, he didn't learn kind of how to communicate his feelings in ways other than hitting at home. It could be because his father was traveling. It could be, I think I shared with you last week, like my own son, 5-year-old son, struggles with expressing his frustration appropriately. And I'm home with him a lot, right? And I think for some people it's more difficult, and for some people it's less. And I think what I really liked about that vignette, Eva, was that it's different than an autopsy that your mother-in-law kind of conducted. Ah, there you go. It's different than the ones that like Lavoie talks about because it was more public in that sense, but it addressed the same features, right? Like what was going on in this breakdown? What could we do to resolve the parts of the breakdown that are constraining like a positive social interaction, and then how can we support each other in doing that? I think the next step in the autopsy that I really like is kind of like going back later and looking at it, kind of evaluating like, did things improve? How did things shift or change? And I think that that's also something that would be available in a kindergarten class. I taught kindergarten. They're surprisingly insightful, right? Often. So I think there's potential there to do that with young students as well, and I think that starts to build some of that explicit knowledge of what it means to interact in a pro-social way that can be really, really powerful for kids. Great. I don't know anything about Go Noodle, but I guess I will look it up myself just for fun. Oh, Adriana, your school's moving towards mindfulness. Great. Yeah, kids do like yoga from my experience. I went to I did yoga as a young kid in the 70s. I went to that kind of school that was promoting that kind of approach to PE, and I remember like being in love with doing yoga. I also do yoga as an adult and really love it. But I think those work nicely in concert, right? Like that kind of mindfulness and the slow breathing and the sense of calm. And the attention to empathy and thinking of connectedness with others is really powerful. And I'm glad to hear that that's something that's being featured in schools these days. I think there's been a lot of value, from what I understand, in mindfulness. I heard something on the radio a few months ago about soldiers with PTSD, and there's mindfulness training for them that's been really, really effective to get them to start kind of retracing the way they're or reformatting almost like the way their mental pathways go when they interact with others. So these are people, if they were at war, who would be interacting with others in a sense of aggression, fear, danger, and in like an adversarial dynamic, right? And then through mindfulness training, they've been working on empathy for others and a sense of connectedness and a way to kind of look differently at how they are approaching and experiencing their interactions with others. And they said it's been extremely powerful on NPR. I haven't looked into that as much. My knowledge base is obviously more about kids in schools, but it seems like a potentially good connection. Great. I had a question. First of all, I feel like you guys have really good resources here, and I want to ask about the dojo, because who was talking about the dojo? I saw it back here, and I feel like you, ah, ha, ha, Cindy, you said you love dojo, but there was the videos. Vanessa, yeah. So Vanessa, do you mind? Do you want to pop on the phone and talk about it? Because all I know about dojo is like behavior management with the ding, 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 ding in the classrooms, and I'm curious, what kind of videos are there? You don't have to come on the phone, although you can. You could write it if you want, but I don't know if I'm thinking of a different dojo, but I'm guessing I'm thinking of the same one. Are you here? Oh, okay. If you have, if you're, yay!
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, sorry.
It's okay.
Also, I was just asking about, because I think Valerie saw the videos, but we use it for behavior management. I haven't actually seen any of the videos, so I'm going to call out Val and tell her that she needs to jump on to explain a little bit further.
No problem at all. No problem. Val, do you want to tell us about that? You're not obligated, but I am curious.
Hello.
Hi.
So they have these social stories that build. Each week a new chapter comes out, and they've made the characters out of the little monster avatars.
Oh.
So like this one that we just watched yesterday and had our discussion about was this little blue monster Sarah is starting to take an art class with the other little monsters, and she's feeling anxiety, and they call the anxiety a dip.
A dip?
As you're trying to learn new things, you're going to have this dip before you actually reach success and move up. And just going through what is it that's triggered, why does she feel that way, who else has felt that way. So she's really into science. So then she is reading about Thomas Edison and his dip before inventing a successful light bulb.
Oh,
and
interesting.
It kind of ends, this is just the first chapter, ends with what should Sarah do next? And the kids are so excited about it that they get really, I mean, their critical thinking during this time is amazing.
That's
and just their willingness to share and their really understanding multiple perspectives. It's such a great conversation starter.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting to me too, because what I like about that, I don't know if anyone else kind of picked up on this angle with it, but the dojo then was talking about emotional responses to struggles in learning, right? So it's like this dip, like your anxiety. It's not like a social interaction that broke down with a peer necessarily, but like literally the content itself can call up anxiety. Is that, which I find really interesting and I have not seen in many other programs. And I like that for a lot of reasons, especially for kids who have learning struggles. I think a lesson like that is really powerful, right? So that, like, for kids who typically encounter struggle and strain when they're faced with academic tasks, I think acknowledging that and offering kids a way to think about it and compare themselves kind of to like, oh, I remember a character in the story had the same thing is a really interesting approach. That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. Can I ask you guys one other dojo question? Do you use dojo for behavior management with the like screen up there and the ding up or ding down? I supervise student teachers that use it in their classroom. Do you do? Okay.
Vanessa and I, our tutor team uses it for points. We give only positive points. We don't do the negative ones.
Got it.
And it's easier for me if I know someone isn't going to earn a point. I'm typically giving them right before they're leaving. So if I know someone isn't getting a point and it's not when we're going to leave, I just do it really quickly. I get it up on my phone instead of up on the screen.
I see.
I see. Do it that way. Or I have kids where it's just, oh, you're ready to go. You're at your point, get your snack and go, or get your lunch and go. And then I have the conversation with the kids who are in the classroom, so it isn't as much of like, oh, you didn't get your monster point.
That's partly how what I was wondering about. But then Yvonne, you say you do take it away in the public way also, like it's up on the screen, or it's on your phone. Just curious. Both. Okay. Yeah, and I see it. You know what's funny is that I have never. Parents log in. The classroom that I supervise in, they use it. The reason I'm going down this pathway, by the way, is I have been very curious about the emotional impacts for kids of that, and I didn't use technology like that when I was in the classroom. I'm kind of notoriously bad about point systems and like following through on being really consistent with them, so that like wasn't something I gravitated towards a lot as a classroom teacher because I felt like I wasn't using the systems effectively, so then they can have a negative effect actually. But then this one, the dojo, it's like it's so public that the teacher has to be really on top of it from what I've seen. And the teachers that do use it that I've observed, they really love it. For me personally, I felt confused about how I would successfully execute that, so I was just kind of pushing around curious. It's kind of like, exactly. That's a good point, Laura Beth. Because of those color tags, people see where everyone is anyway. And of course, there's not really secrets in the classroom in terms of that stuff anyway, so it's probably not as big a deal to the kids as it might appear like it would be to me. That's interesting. Thank you. You guys are teaching me. That's not really our topic for tonight, but I was really curious. Thank you. Okay. Oh, and thank you. I see that. Is that Escondido? Who put that in that mindfulness camp? Teresa, thank you. 4 days of mindfulness training for families. Oh, you went with your family. Great. See, San Diego County is big on that, I think. Right? Escondido's great. Yeah, I mean, I feel like all of us should. I feel like mindfulness is good for everyone, but I do yoga, so that's my own stance. Okay. So there's a couple things I wanted to go over with you guys if we're good to move on from here for now. Just like about a few things kind of like about the course in your last assignment, and then believe it or not, I'm going to stop us at 6:45 because it is very important that you guys have time available to fill out the course evaluation. I believe Amy Handready has sent a message to everyone today. She said she did. And she's the evaluator for this course, and so that's like kind of data she needs as much as possible. So some people will just have course 4 to fill in. If you feel like, gosh, I didn't really fill in course 3 either, and you can find her email. I think it was from, oh, thanks, Ema. I think it was from March 29th, right? That email, then I'll ask you to fill that in as well. And yes, thanks, guys. Yeah, it's my birthday. It's, yeah. I've hit the point where it's, I'm not saying I'm too old for birthdays, but yeah. Thank you. I needed that, Shira. I feel really like, not young. Thank you. You know what? I'm going out to sushi dinner with my family after we get off this call, and I'm really excited about that. I think I've been writing my dissertation all day, and I have to turn that in really soon, and I'm very nervous and stressed about that. But I'm gonna take a couple hours with our good friends and our kids and my family and go have some sushi. And I may be enjoying sake as well. Okay, thanks guys. You're very sweet. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I want to tell you a couple things I did for you, and I want to say it was Cindy. I'm not positive, but I think Cindy was asking last week if I would give you some resources on fishbowls. Oh, Teresa, I'll tell you about my dissertation in a second. First, I'll show you the fishbowl stuff. So I put these 2 documents up here on the resources at the top of our Moodle page. They are by no stretch of the imagination the only resources on fishbowl discussions. There's like if you just Google fishbowl discussion structure, you're going to get like a world of information. I liked these particular directions. They come from Alaska, like some town in Alaska. They're schools. I just thought they were laid out quite nicely. So that's available. And then there's this link for the sample video that I had selected a couple weeks ago for a different project I was working on. And it's a YouTube link. It's just a teacher in Connecticut, and he kind of goes through why he started doing fishbowl discussions with his class, and then how he does it and what it looks like. And it's kind of funny and but really well done and poignant. And I just like that video. So I thought I would share that with you if that's useful. Please take it as you want. Ignore it if you don't want. No big deal. But that's a structure that's available for you. Okay. The other thing I wanted to check in about with you guys is I thought I saw something, and I promise I will tell you about my dissertation. Did someone say social skills autopsies? Was it Eva that it was helpful? I just wanted to make sure. Did anyone have questions about social skills autopsies? Is there anything that was either unclear about that or that you wanted to push on, agree with, don't agree with? I haven't read through. I saw that you turned in your reading responses, but I didn't yet. That's a good question, Shira. I didn't read your responses yet. How practical it is as a classroom teacher. So that has been, yeah. That was why I was asking you guys. Exactly. I think it does and doesn't. So in terms of time taking, the way Rick Lavoie has it set up, it's really a private conversation. That doesn't have to be really long if it's a kind of routine that the kids are somewhat familiar with. So just like anything, like zones of regulation, the first time you introduce the ideas to the kids, different colors about how I'm feeling, that can take a long time. But then over time, once they're used to it, you can just say yellow, go to blue, right? And then you start kind of having these shorthand ways of referencing it. And so it shortens it up. So I think there's some amount of social skills autopsy work that can be laid as a foundation such that then when there's a breakdown, it could be much faster. For example, Eva's story was really interesting where that was kind of like a whole class autopsy. If that kindergarten teacher, her mother-in-law, used the form that Rick Lavoie has, like an autopsy form, or a specific set of steps to go through as a whole class, I think that then if you did that like a few times as a whole class, either with a real breakdown that occurred or with something external that you watch as a video or something like that, then the work of the one-on-one time is greatly reduced. That said, yeah, it's a private interaction that does take more time. And in that sense, um, for a classroom teacher, that is a classic, right? Like you need individual time with the kid, but you have a lot of kids in the class. And so balancing how to make that happen is often a creative act. And so I think that social skills autopsies are useful in some ways, but they are limited in other ways. And so I think that some of that, getting the kids able to use the language of it for themselves, would be a good support. I'm going to read, I saw you guys writing, so I just want to see. I feel like the student-directed bullying program. I forgot the name. Oh! Yeah, it's not the student-directed. I'm trying to think, Adriana. Is it not the justice one? Not restorative justice is what I was thinking of. I don't know, though. You worry about your ability to follow up on a similar social situation. Yeah, that is something you could modify, I think, for kids at your age. And I would think for like someone like Sherry, you're teaching third grade, right? So that might be a grade level at which I would maybe do like a whole class, almost like a second step lesson, but it's not second step, like an autopsy lesson where you kind of look at a social scenario that broke down, autopsy it as a class, and then you could revisit like a follow-up lesson, the same issue, and so find a similar situation and check the learning that way and kind of establish the routine of social skills autopsies as existing over time, and then do a kind of more shorthand version. That's what I would consider doing if you think there's value for you in it. I think it's a cool idea. I also think, Rick Lavoie himself has worked with, that's my mother-in-law calling it, I'm ignoring. Rick Lavoie himself has worked with students who have disabilities and in kind of like special settings. And so I think he might have more time available for one-on-one than a typical classroom teacher would. So I would feel free to modify it. I also think, I think the similar social situation is really important, and I'm wondering if there are ways to modify it so that if you're working with an individual student, instead of waiting for them to apply it to something later, you kind of introduce a theoretical scenario with them in the moment and then curtail like the kind of follow-up part. I think there's different ways to do it, but I wouldn't feel tethered to it looking exactly like Rick Lavoie does it. Other thoughts on that? Social skills autopsies, do they seem useful, not so useful? Like, yeah, I say try it. I would do it as a whole class and just see what happens for fun. And I think that all of these kinds of approaches, so there's like mindfulness training, there's zones of regulation, there's social skills autopsies, there's second step, there's dojo lessons, there's a lot of resources out there. And I think that for kids, having lots of them where they're not seen as like part of a whole could potentially be confusing. But I think that getting the message across to kids that social cognition and social skills, but really social cognition, like thinking about social interactions in a kind of analytic way, is important and is relevant to learning and is helpful. I think that getting that message across is like the big idea. And then the means through which you do that are going to vary depending on what are the structures of your school, what are the priorities in your classroom, what are the issues that are coming up for kids. All of that stuff is logistical kind of and can be modified. But that message that the way that you are learning to interact socially is really important for social development and also for academic development. I think that message can be brought through any of these options of ways to address social skills in the classroom. And so I would just kind of want to pull that out and feature that for you guys now, because I think that That's the key. And the rest of it is, look, if your school uses Dojo, it makes a lot of sense to use the Dojo videos, right? If your school has a big emphasis on OT and you're using zones of regulation, combining mindfulness with that makes a lot of sense, because then it's not confusing to the kids what's going on. Second step would then look a little bit different than those other approaches, and so you'd want to kind of be explicit. So the purpose is just unpacking, like, the purpose of the curriculum, the function of those social curricula, and how you're using them, and making that kind of clear for the kids, I think, is really the big message. But addressing social cognition is our big message, and I think is also something that the kids benefit from hearing and understanding for themselves. Yeah. And I don't know if it's called No Bully. Maybe Adriana. I don't know. If you guys figured out, let me know, because I'm curious. I love these kinds of things. So we have just a few minutes left. So I want to just check in and find out if there are any. I gave you all feedback on your part 2 of the learning lesson assignment. And so I'm hoping you have some ideas for that. It's pretty open in terms of, like, the particular task, lesson, support, or scaffold that you introduce to the student, and that's intentional because I really am committed to it being useful for your practice. You can do a hypothetical idea if you want, but I encourage you to make it useful in practice if that seems valuable to you. So I just want to check in. Are there any questions about getting that assignment completed? And if not, great. And if something comes up between now and Sunday night, please email me to get in touch. I will definitely respond. And that assignment, there's like, mostly people have actually kept up with the assignments on time, which is great. And I know we've been over spring break and all that stuff. However, just FYI, it would be great for all assignments to be in by the end of Sunday night, because it's week 6. So if you haven't, just take a look back through what you've turned in and what you haven't. If there's stuff you haven't turned in, I'm not looking to, like, kind of ding people on points for time of turning it in. But if you get it in by the end of Sunday night, it's like all is well. If you can't get everything in by Sunday night, email me personally so I know, because I will soon after that start doing final grades for the course. I don't think it'll be a week or so until your final grades are out and published from me, but I'll be in the process of working on it during that time. So if you need a little bit of flexibility in there, just email me. I'm happy to talk to you about that. Okay? All right. Last thing, I will tell you what my dissertation is about, and then I'll let you go. It won't be a long time. My dissertation is on student teaching, actually. So it's on learning in practice. And I did a study, a designed professional development intervention, we called it, for classroom teachers who have student teachers in their room, so the mentor teachers, and for the university supervisors that come out and visit like 3 times a quarter at UCI, and it's by semester, so it's probably 6 times a semester at CSUN. And I brought the classroom mentor teachers together with supervisors who share a student teacher, and we just got clarity around the language of what we were looking for with the student teachers in terms of what practices they're gonna enact in teaching, and some clarity and consistency around not just what we were looking for, but the kinds of feedback that we give to them. And so it was a very practical study in terms of what I did with them, and then the research around it is very theoretical. I use activity theory, which is a fun theory, I think, and it's all about looking at any action or speech that somebody makes or comment as embedded in, like, it kind of carries with it a larger system of activity. So when the mentor teachers in my study were making comments about how they thought student teachers should learn in the classroom, they're bringing in all the knowledge of what it means to be a classroom teacher at that school, and that's embedded in their words and their perspective. And the university supervisors are bringing in the perspective of the university and the requirements for getting your credential and all that stuff. And sometimes those are at odds, and when they're at odds, it's uncomfortable for the practitioners, And it's also really uncomfortable for the student teacher who gets confused by these kind of mixed signals and mixed messages. So that's my study. And I've gotten, since I left the classroom, I work more and more with student teachers now, and I really, I like it a lot more than I thought I would. My favorite is working with actual practicing teachers like yourselves, but I feel like getting that next generation kind of ready to be in the classroom in a powerful way will help contribute to students' lives and experiences at school, which is my like ultimate commitment. So let's see, Teresa. Oh, yeah, you're teaching. Exactly, exactly. So here's the thing, Teresa. Here's what happens. As I went to grad school and I start reading all this research on teaching and learning to teach and all this stuff, the way the research communities and universities think of classroom teachers is like from a very big distance. And they kind of think of it like, well, I don't know what's going on in there, so let's just like do all this stuff at the university and then they go apply it in the classroom. But that really undermines like how important a classroom teacher is in educating a student teacher, because you're with them all the time, and they are, and also you're like learning about teaching, and the expert on teaching, in my opinion, is the classroom teacher. The researchers at the university have value to offer, but really the classroom teacher is the expert here in terms of classroom teaching. So my goal of my research is actually to kind of raise the voice of the teacher in the research and in the literature as like a really important person. So I'm with you. You're welcome. Oh, thanks, Adriana. Yeah, I supervise student teachers, which is like a passion of mine. I love it, and I get to be in the classrooms a lot too. That's where I've been watching the dojo, and then start next year. I'll be a lecturer at the UCI credential program. So I'm gonna start. I'll be teaching there. But I hope to still teach this course, because this course is very close to my heart and I really love it. Okay, so it is 6:47 and you guys have your final evaluation. So I'm going to give you time to do that during this hour, so you don't have to take additional time. And also it's my birthday, so the timing is coincidentally quite nice. So if it's good, I will just, oh, thank you guys. I really love my time with you, and I just thank you all for your thoughtful contributions and participation, and I just wish you all the best moving forward. You have my email, contact me anytime, and have fun in course 5 and getting done. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later. Bye. Bye. Thank you, Shira. Well, take care. Bye-bye.